Have you ever fallen for someone who runs hot one day and ice cold the next? That mysterious person who draws you in, then pulls away just when you think you've got them figured out? You're not alone, and there's actually a name for this seductive personality type. Welcome to Story-Driven English, where today we're diving into The Art of Maybe, an original story inspired by Robert Greene's fascinating concept of the Coquette, the sixth seducer archetype from his best-selling book, The Art of Seduction. This isn't just any English learning story. It's a psychological journey into one of the most powerful attraction patterns in human relationships. You'll follow history professor Oliver Reed as he tries to understand the enigmatic French literature professor Elise Laurent, whose unpredictable nature leaves him constantly guessing. In the next 45 minutes, you'll not only enhance your English vocabulary and listening skills, but you'll also gain insights into human psychology that might explain that puzzling relationship in your own life. Is this hot and cold behavior a calculated strategy or something deeper? Before we begin this captivating tale, make sure you click that subscribe button and turn on notifications. Our channel delivers engaging stories every week that build your English skills while exploring fascinating concepts from literature, psychology, and culture. Our subscribers tell us these story-based lessons help them retain vocabulary and expressions better than any textbook ever could. If you're ready to improve your English while uncovering the secrets of seduction and human connection, let's begin our journey into The Art of Maybe. Pay close attention. The psychological insights in this story might just change how you view relationships forever. The Art of Maybe. In the quiet university town of Willowbrook, where autumn leaves painted the streets in amber and gold, lived a history professor named Oliver Reed. At 42, Oliver was known for his thoughtful nature and his remarkable ability to bring historical figures to life in his lectures. But for all his knowledge of the past, he remained puzzled by one particular person in his present. Elise Laurent, the new French literature professor who had arrived at Willowbrook University just 3 months ago. Oliver first met Elise at the faculty welcome dinner in September. With her chestnut hair and intelligent eyes, she immediately stood out among the crowd of academics. When the department head introduced them, Elise's warm smile and firm handshake left an impression on Oliver that lingered long after the evening ended. "I've heard wonderful things about your Napoleon lectures," she had said, her slight French accent adding melody to her words. "Perhaps I could sit in sometime?" "Of course," Oliver had replied, oddly flustered by her direct gaze. "You'd be most welcome." The following week, true to her word, Elise appeared at the back of his lecture hall. Oliver found himself speaking with unusual animation, weaving historical facts with human stories as he described Napoleon's rise to power. After class, several students approached with questions, and by the time he had finished answering them, Elise had disappeared. A handwritten note arrived in his faculty mailbox the next day. "Your lecture brought the emperor to life. Coffee sometime? EL." Along with her phone number. Oliver, who hadn't dated since his divorce 3 years ago, felt a flutter of excitement. He waited 2 days before calling her, not wanting to appear too eager. "Ah, Professor Reed," she answered, her voice warm with recognition. "I was beginning to think you'd lost my note." "Not at all," he replied. "I've been grading papers. Would you like to get coffee this weekend?" "This weekend?" She hesitated. "I'm afraid I have plans. But perhaps next Tuesday after your lecture." And so began the curious dance that would consume Oliver's thoughts for months to come. They met for coffee that Tuesday, and their conversation flowed effortlessly from French literature to historical parallels between American and French revolutions. Elise was knowledgeable, witty, and attentive, asking questions that made Oliver feel both challenged and appreciated. As they parted, Oliver suggested dinner that weekend. "That sounds lovely," Elise said, touching his arm briefly. "Let me check my calendar and get back to you." 2 days passed with no word. Oliver found himself checking his phone more often than usual. When he finally received her text, it was apologetic. "Dear Oliver, I'm sorry but I need to prepare for a department meeting." Rain check. Elise. This pattern continued through October and into November. Elise would be warm and engaged during their conversations, making Oliver feel as though he were the only person in her world. Then she would become distant, taking days to answer messages or canceling plans last minute. "I'm sorry about dinner," she told him after one such cancellation. "Let me make it up to you. There's a French film festival this weekend at the Arts Center. Would you like to join me?" The film was a romantic drama set in 1920s Paris. Sitting next to Elise in the darkened theater, Oliver was acutely aware of her presence. When their hands brushed reaching for popcorn, she didn't pull away immediately. After the film, they walked through the town square, discussing the themes of unrequited love. "The filmmaker captured something universal," Elise said, her breath visible in the cold night air. "The way we always want what remains just beyond our reach." "Is that what you believe?" Oliver asked. "That desire only exists in the chase?" Elise looked at him thoughtfully. "Not only in the chase, no. But desire thrives in uncertainty, don't you think? In the space between yes and no where maybe lives." Before Oliver could respond, Elise's phone chimed. She checked it and frowned. "I'm sorry, I need to take this. My sister in Paris." She stepped away to answer the call, speaking rapid French. When she returned, her demeanor had changed. "I must go," she said, her voice now professional and distant. "Family matter. Thank you for a lovely evening, Oliver." She kissed him quickly on both cheeks, European style, and was gone before he could offer to walk her home. The following week, Oliver attended a faculty meeting where Elise gave a presentation on student exchange programs with French universities. She was poised and articulate, gesturing elegantly as she spoke. Oliver noticed he wasn't the only male professor watching her with admiration. After the meeting, he approached her, but she was surrounded by colleagues asking questions. She caught his eye over the shoulder of the mathematics professor and smiled apologetically, mouthing "later," before turning her attention back to the conversation. Later never came that day. Or the next. When Oliver emailed about meeting for coffee, her response was friendly but non-committal. "This week is quite busy with midterm grading. Perhaps next week." Oliver found himself in the unusual position of feeling like a student awaiting a grade. He, who could map the complex political maneuvers of historical figures, couldn't decipher Elise's signals. Was she interested in him or merely being collegial? Her actions seemed contradictory. Warm one moment, distant the next. Seeking perspective, Oliver met his longtime friend, Dr. Diana Chen, for lunch at their favorite campus cafe. "She sounds like a classic coquette," Diana said after hearing his account of the past few months. Diana, a psychology professor with a direct manner, had been Oliver's confidant since graduate school. A coquette, Oliver repeated, the term feeling archaic on his tongue. Yes, someone who creates desire through alternating warmth and distance, Diana explained, stirring her tea. It's actually a fascinating psychological pattern. Have you ever read Robert Greene's work on types of seducers? Oliver shook his head. I stick to historical texts. Well, in his book The Art of Seduction, Greene identifies different archetypal seducers. The sixth type is the coquette, someone who creates attraction through unpredictability and delayed satisfaction. That sounds manipulative, Oliver frowned. It can be, Diana acknowledged. But it's not always conscious. Some people develop this pattern from past relationships or cultural influences. The key characteristic is the hot and cold behavior, showing interest then pulling away, creating emotional fluctuations that keep the other person hooked. Oliver considered this. Greene mentions specific historical examples? Several. One of the most famous was Madame Récamier in 19th-century France. She maintained a salon where the most brilliant minds of her era would gather, all of them half in love with her. She was married but remained, shall we say, technically virtuous while still encouraging admiration. She would show great interest in a man's ideas, make him feel uniquely understood, then become distant or turn her attention to someone else. Men found themselves competing for her favor, writing better works, developing more refined thoughts, all to earn back her attention. That sounds exactly like... Oliver stopped himself. Like your Professor Laurent? Diana raised an eyebrow. History repeats itself, my friend. After lunch, curiosity drove Oliver to the university library where he found Greene's book. The description of the coquette seemed to describe Elise with uncanny accuracy. The coquette is both hot and cold, offering encouragement and pleasure, then withdrawing and frustrating. This behavior creates excitement through contrasting emotions, hope and frustration, pleasure and pain. Oliver read about historical coquettes like Madame Récamier, who never consummated relationships with her many admirers, maintaining power through perpetual unavailability. He read about the Chinese Empress Yang Kei-fei, who would show the emperor great affection only to suddenly become cold and distant, driving him to desperate measures to regain her favor. As he turned the pages, Oliver felt a growing unease. Was he simply another admirer in Elise's collection? Was her behavior calculated to keep him interested? Or was he overthinking normal busy professor behavior? The next day, Oliver arrived early to his office hours to find Elise waiting outside his door. Oliver, she smiled warmly. I hope I'm not interrupting. Not at all, he said, unlocking his office door. Please come in. Elise entered, admiring the bookshelves that lined his walls. Your collection is impressive. So many first editions. A historian's weakness, Oliver admitted, watching as she traced her finger along the spines of several volumes. I wanted to apologize for being so scarce lately, she said, turning to face him. End of semester is always chaotic. No need to apologize, Oliver said carefully. We all have obligations. Still, I miss our conversations. She sat in the chair across from his desk, crossing her legs elegantly. I'm hosting a small dinner party this Saturday. Nothing fancy, just a few colleagues. Would you come? Oliver hesitated, remembering Diana's warnings about the coquette pattern. Who else will be there? Professor Martinez from Spanish literature, Dr. Abernathy from music, and perhaps Dr. Wilson from philosophy. She leaned forward slightly. Please say yes. It wouldn't be the same without you. Her earnest expression made Oliver's resolve waver. I'd be happy to come, he heard himself say. Elise's face lit up. Wonderful. 8 o'clock. I'll text you my address. She stood to leave, then paused at the door. Oh, and Oliver? Bring that historical insight of yours. It's always the highlight of my day. After she left, Oliver sat back in his chair, conflicted. Her warmth seemed genuine, yet he couldn't help analyzing her behavior through the lens of what he'd read. Was her invitation sincere interest or just another cycle in the Coquette pattern? Saturday arrived, and Oliver found himself standing outside Elise's apartment building, a bottle of wine in hand. Her apartment was on the 3rd floor of a renovated Victorian house with a view of the campus clock tower. He rang the bell, feeling inexplicably nervous. Elise opened the door wearing a simple black dress that somehow looked anything but simple on her. Oliver, she smiled, leaning in to kiss his cheeks. I'm so glad you came. The apartment was tastefully decorated with an eclectic mix of modern furniture and antique pieces. Books filled the shelves, and several impressive art prints hung on the walls. The air smelled of rosemary and garlic. Something smells delicious, Oliver said, handing her the wine. Cocoa vin, she replied. An old family recipe. Thank you for the wine. It's perfect with the meal. To Oliver's surprise, there were no other guests in the apartment. Am I early? He asked, checking his watch. No, Elise said, a hint of mischief in her eyes. I'm afraid the others had to cancel. Professor Martinez has the flu, Dr. Abernathy had a last-minute performance, and Dr. Wilson. She shrugged elegantly. Well, philosophers are notoriously unreliable, aren't they? Oliver wasn't sure whether to believe her. So it's just us? Is that a problem? She asked, her expression suddenly uncertain. I could have cancelled, but I'd already prepared everything, and I was looking forward to seeing you. Her vulnerability seemed authentic, and Oliver felt his suspicions begin to dissolve. No problem at all. I'm happy to have you all to myself. Elise's smile returned. Excellent. Wine. Dinner was exceptional, both the food and the conversation. They discussed favorite books, travel experiences, and the challenges of academia. Elise was attentive and present, asking thoughtful questions and sharing personal stories that made Oliver feel privileged to know her better. After dinner, they moved to the small balcony overlooking the town. The night was clear and crisp, stars visible above the glow of streetlights. I have a confession, Elise said, wrapping her cardigan more tightly around herself in the cool air. What's that? Oliver asked, curious. There never was a dinner party. I only invited you. Oliver looked at her surprised. Why the pretense? She looked down, uncharacteristically shy. I wasn't sure you'd come if it was just me. You've seemed hesitant lately. Oliver considered his response carefully. I've been confused by your signals, to be honest. Sometimes you seem very interested. Other times distant. Ah, she nodded slowly. I can see how it might appear that way. She was quiet for a moment. May I explain? Oliver nodded. Waiting. When I first arrived here, I promised myself I would focus on establishing my academic reputation. Relationships have a way of complicating things for women in academia. But I felt a connection with you immediately. She looked up at him. It scared me a little. Scared you? Oliver asked, surprised. Yes. I've had relationships that consumed me, where I lost myself. So I've developed this habit of pulling back when I feel myself getting too attached. She gave a self-deprecating smile. It's not a very sophisticated emotional strategy. Oliver thought about Greene's description of the coquette. Elise's behavior fit the pattern, but her explanation suggested it wasn't calculated manipulation but rather a self-protective mechanism. I recently read something about this kind of hot and cold behavior, he said carefully. In Robert Greene's book about seduction types. Elise's eyebrows rose. You've been reading seduction theory, Professor Reed? How intriguing. Oliver felt his face warm. Professional curiosity. He writes about historical figures. Ah yes, Greene categorizes the coquette as one of his seducer types, doesn't he? Elise said, surprising him with her knowledge. Let me guess. You thought I was strategically employing those tactics? The thought crossed my mind, Oliver admitted. Elise laughed, the sound genuine and unguarded. I'm flattered you think me so calculating. The truth is much less impressive. Just ordinary human ambivalence and fear of vulnerability. She looked at him directly. Is that disappointing? Not at all, Oliver said honestly. It's refreshing. Their conversation continued late into the night, touching on childhood memories, professional aspirations, and favorite historical periods. Around midnight, Oliver reluctantly said he should go. At the door, Elise took his hand. I've enjoyed this evening immensely, Oliver. Thank you for coming, despite your reservations. I'm glad I did, he replied, squeezing her hand gently. Would you like to attend the symphony with me next Friday? She asked. They're performing Debussy. No pretend dinner party this time, just a straightforward invitation. I'd love to, Oliver said, feeling something settle comfortably within him. She leaned up and kissed his cheek, her lips lingering a moment longer than usual. Good night, Oliver. As he walked home under the starry sky, Oliver reflected on the evening. Perhaps Elise did embody some aspects of the coquette archetype, but there was depth and authenticity behind her pattern of approach and retreat. Her behavior wasn't simply a calculated seduction strategy, but a complex interplay of genuine interest and self-protection. Friday arrived, and Oliver dressed with care for their symphony date. As he was about to leave his apartment, his phone chimed with a message from Elise. Looking forward to tonight. Meet at the concert hall? Something came up that I need to handle first. That familiar pattern, the slight withdrawal, the creation of separate arrivals rather than traveling together. Oliver felt a twinge of doubt return. Was this another example of her keeping him at arm's length? He arrived at the concert hall early, scanning the crowd for Elise as people filtered in. The minutes ticked by, and she didn't appear. 5 minutes before the performance was scheduled to begin, Oliver checked his phone. No messages. He was about to call her when he spotted her hurrying up the steps of the concert hall, slightly breathless. Her hair was pulled back in a simple chignon, and she wore an elegant blue dress that caught the light as she moved. "I'm so sorry," she said as she reached him. "One of my students was having a crisis about her paper. I couldn't just leave her." There was a smudge of ink on her wrist, and her normally impeccable appearance had a slightly rushed quality that suggested she was telling the truth. "No problem," Oliver said, relieved. "We still have time." The performance was magnificent, the delicate impressionism of Debussy's compositions filling the hall with shimmering sound. Halfway through Clair de Lune, Elise's hand found Oliver's in the darkened theater, her fingers intertwining with his. They remained that way through the rest of the performance, a simple connection that felt more significant than any elaborate romantic gesture. After the concert, they walked through the quiet streets of Willowbrook, still holding hands. "There's something I've been wanting to ask you," Oliver said as they passed the illuminated fountain in the town square. "Yes." Elise looked up at him, her expression open. "This pattern of yours. Drawing close then pulling away. Have you noticed it happening with us?" Elise was quiet for a moment, considering. "Yes," she finally said. "But less than usual, I think. With you, I find myself wanting to stay more than retreat." "Why do you think that is?" She stopped walking and turned to face him. "Because you notice. You pay attention. Most men are so caught up in their own pursuit that they never really see the woman they're pursuing." She smiled slightly. "You see me, the real me, not just what you want to see." "I try to," Oliver said. "Though I admit I've been confused at times." "Confusion isn't always bad," she said softly. "It keeps us paying attention, doesn't it?" "In my experience, the moment we think we have someone completely figured out is the moment we stop really seeing them." Oliver recognized the wisdom in her words. "Madame Recamier might agree with you." Elise laughed. "Ah yes, the famous Coquette of Paris." But her salon wasn't just about admiration. It was a place where ideas could flourish without the constraints of conventional relationships. There's something to be said for maintaining a certain independence, even while connecting deeply. They continued walking, discussing the fine line between healthy independence and emotional unavailability. When they reached Elise's apartment building, she invited him up for tea. As winter turned to spring in Willowbrook, Oliver and Elise's relationship deepened. The pattern didn't disappear entirely. There were still times when Elise would become distant or cancel plans unexpectedly. But now, Oliver understood these moments not as manipulation but as her way of maintaining the equilibrium she needed. Sometimes when they were together, he would catch her watching him with a mixture of affection and something like surprise, as if she hadn't expected to find herself so content in his company. One evening in April, as they sat on her balcony watching the sunset paint the sky in watercolor hues, Elise brought up their early conversations about Greene's archetype. "Do you still think of me as a coquette?" she asked, her head resting against his shoulder. Oliver considered the question carefully. "I think elements of that pattern are part of who you are," he said truthfully. "Just as my analytical nature is part of me. But neither of us is reducible to a type in a book." She nodded, satisfied with his answer. "You know, in Greene's description, the coquette never fully surrenders. Always keeping something in reserve, always maintaining that element of mystery and distance." "And you?" Oliver asked, his heart beating a little faster. Elise lifted her head to look at him, her eyes reflecting the golden light of sunset. "I find myself wanting to disprove his theory," she said softly. "At least with you." As spring blossomed into summer, their relationship continued to evolve. Elise's pattern of hot and cold behavior gradually moderated, though never entirely disappeared. Oliver came to appreciate the rhythm of their connection, the passionate closeness balanced by space for individual growth. In June, Oliver was invited to present at a history conference in Paris. Without hesitation, he asked Elise to join him. "Paris in summer," she mused, her eyes lighting up. "Show me your historian's view of my city?" "Gladly," he replied. "Though I suspect I'll be learning more from you than you from me." The trip was transformative for their relationship. In Paris, away from the familiar routines of Willowbrook, they discovered new dimensions to each other. Oliver saw how Elise came alive in her native language, gesturing expressively as she negotiated with market vendors or debated literature with old university friends. She, in turn, saw his passion as he stood in places where history had unfolded, his eyes shining as he connected stories from the past to the present streets and buildings around them. One evening, they visited the Petit Palais, where an exhibition included portraits of Madame Récamier, including the famous painting by Jacques-Louis David showing her in elegant repose on a chaise longue. "The ultimate coquette," Oliver remarked, studying the portrait. "Painted by multiple artists, admired by countless intellectuals, yet always maintaining her distance." "There's power in that," Elise said thoughtfully. In her time, women had few options for independence. Her strategy allowed her to create a space where her intellect could flourish without being subordinated to a man's. "True," Oliver acknowledged, "though I wonder if it brought her happiness in the end." "Perhaps her goal wasn't conventional happiness," Elise suggested. "Perhaps it was freedom. The freedom to be herself fully, to cultivate her mind, to choose the terms of her connections." They stood in contemplative silence before the painting, each reflecting on the balance between independence and intimacy in their own relationship. Later that night, in their hotel room overlooking the Seine, Elise embraced Oliver with unusual vulnerability. "I've been thinking about what you said, about happiness," she said, her voice quiet in the darkness. "The truth is, I've always been afraid that surrendering to love meant losing myself. I watched my mother disappear into her marriage, becoming a shadow of the vibrant woman she once was." Oliver stroked her hair gently. "It doesn't have to be that way." "I know that now," she said, looking up at him. "With you I feel more myself, not less. You don't want me to be smaller or different. You're interested in who I actually am, contradictions, complexities, and all." "Of course," Oliver said. "That's what love is, isn't it? Not possession but appreciation." The word love hung in the air between them, spoken for the first time. Elise's eyes widened slightly, but she didn't pull away as she might have months earlier. "Yes," she said simply. "I think it is." Their final night in Paris, they walked along the Seine, the lights of the city reflecting in the dark water. Street musicians played somewhere in the distance, the notes of an accordion drifting through the warm summer air. "I've been offered a position at Columbia," Elise said suddenly, stopping to lean against the stone parapet overlooking the river. Oliver felt his heart sink. "New York. That's a significant opportunity." "It is," she agreed. "Prestigious department, Better resources for my research. Oliver nodded, trying to keep his expression neutral. When would you start? January. Spring semester. She was watching him carefully. I see, he said, understanding now why she had chosen this moment, their last night in Paris, to tell him. The pattern reasserting itself, closeness followed by distance, now geographic as well as emotional. Aren't you going to ask about the second offer? She said after a moment. Oliver looked at her, confused. There's another offer? Yes. From Willowbrook. They've asked me to take over as department chair when Dr. Hammond retires next year. Her expression was unreadable in the half-light. Less prestigious than Columbia, but other compensations. Hope flickered in Oliver's chest. Which are you leaning toward? That depends, Elise said, turning to face him fully. You see, I've realized something about myself these past months. My pattern, this coquette tendency as you called it, it's been my way of keeping people at a safe distance. A defense mechanism to protect my independence. She took his hands in hers. But real independence isn't about isolation or emotional withholding. It's about making choices from a place of strength rather than fear. And what are you choosing? Oliver asked softly. I'm choosing to stay, she said. Not because I need to, but because I want to. Because what we've built together is worth more to me than the prestige of Columbia. She smiled. Besides, Paris is just a flight away for conferences and summer breaks. Relief and joy washed through Oliver. Are you sure? I would never want you to sacrifice your career. I'm not sacrificing anything, she said firmly. I'm prioritizing. The department chair position is actually perfect for my career trajectory. And it comes with the considerable benefit of being able to wake up next to you each morning. Oliver pulled her close, overwhelmed by the moment. I love you, Elise. With all your patterns and complexities. And I love you, she replied, the words coming easily now. With all your historical analogies and thoughtful analyses. They kissed as the lights of Paris shimmered around them, the city that had witnessed countless love stories through the centuries now adding theirs to its collection. Back in Willowbrook, their relationship continued to deepen. The coquette pattern surfaced occasionally. Elise still needed her independence, still sometimes withdrew to recharge, but now there was understanding rather than confusion. Oliver came to appreciate these rhythms as part of the complex woman he loved. Not as manipulation but as the authentic expression of her nature. In turn, Elise helped Oliver break out of his own patterns of excessive caution and overthinking. Under her influence, he began writing a book about historical figures whose personal relationships had shaped political events. A project that combined his scholarly expertise with a new appreciation for the emotional dimensions of history. 1 year after their trip to Paris, Oliver proposed on the small balcony of Elise's apartment, now their shared home. Her answer was an immediate yes, without the hesitation or ambivalence that might once have characterized her response. At their engagement party, Diana raised her glass in a toast. To Oliver and Elise, proof that understanding someone's patterns doesn't diminish the magic but deepens it. Later, as they danced under strings of lights in their backyard, Oliver whispered, "Happy?" Elise's answer was simple, beyond what I imagined possible. "No regrets about Columbia?" he asked, still occasionally worried she might have sacrificed too much. None, she said firmly. My mother called yesterday. She said something that struck me. The coquette keeps everyone wondering, but in the end, she must also wonder what might have been if she had allowed herself to be truly known. Elise smiled up at him. I'm glad I chose to be known rather than merely admired. As the music played and friends chatted around them, Oliver reflected on their journey. The pattern described in Greene's book had indeed been present in their early relationship, but the reality of loving Elise, the actual woman rather than the archetype, was infinitely more complex and rewarding than any theory could capture. In choosing to stay, Elise hadn't abandoned her independence but had redefined it. In loving her exactly as she was, Oliver had helped her feel safe enough to surrender not to him, but to the possibility of a love that expanded rather than diminished her sense of self. And in that balance between mystery and honesty, between independence and connection, they had found something rare and precious. A relationship where both could be fully themselves, embracing each other's patterns not as flaws to be fixed but as the unique rhythms that made their love story distinctly their own. Key vocabulary, repeated throughout. 1. Coquette, a woman who flirts or teases in a playful manner. 2. Archetype, a very typical example of a certain person or thing. 3. Pattern, a regular and repeated way in which something happens or is done. 4. Seduction, the act of attracting someone to a feeling or action. 5. Vulnerability, the quality of being easily hurt emotionally. 6. Independence, freedom from control or influence of others. 7. Ambivalence, having mixed feelings or contradictory ideas about something. 8. Fluctuation, an irregular rising and falling in number or amount. 9. Pursue/pursuit, to follow or chase someone or something. 10. Withdrawal, the act of moving back or away from a situation. 11. Intimacy, close familiarity or friendship. 12. Surrender, to give up control or yield to another person. 13. Equilibrium, a state of balance between different forces. 14. Self-protective, actions taken to shield oneself from emotional harm. 15. Non-committal, not expressing or revealing commitment to a definite opinion. 16. Calculated, planned or considered in a careful, deliberate manner. 17. Authentic, genuine or real, not copied or false. 18. Dynamics, the forces that produce movement or change within a relationship. 19. Prestige, widespread respect and admiration based on achievement. 20. Trajectory, the path followed by someone or something moving through space. Thank you for joining us for today's story-driven English lesson featuring The Art of Maybe. We hope you enjoyed this exploration of the complex, coquette personality type from Robert Greene's The Art of Seduction, brought to life through Oliver and Elise's thoughtful romance. This story not only helps improve your English vocabulary and comprehension, but also offers insights into human psychology and relationship dynamics. The character of Elise demonstrates how the hot and cold behavior pattern described by Greene can manifest in real life. Not always as calculated manipulation, but sometimes as a self-protective mechanism stemming from fear of vulnerability. Did you notice how the language gradually became more complex throughout the story? This progressive approach helps build your English skills while keeping the narrative accessible. If you enjoyed The Art of Maybe, please hit the like button below and share this video with friends who are also learning English or interested in psychology and literature. Leave a comment telling us which character you related to more: analytical, patient Oliver, or independent, complex Elise? Or share your thoughts on the concept of the coquette in modern relationships. Don't forget to subscribe to Story-Driven English for more stories that combine English learning with fascinating concepts from literature, psychology, history, and current events. Hit the notification bell to stay updated on our weekly uploads. On our channel, we believe that stories are the most engaging way to learn a language. They provide context, emotional connection, and memorable scenarios that help vocabulary and grammar stick in your mind. Join our growing community of English learners who appreciate the power of narrative in language acquisition. Your next story adventure awaits. Until next time, keep reading, keep listening, and keep improving your English, one story at a time.